Hello and welcome with those fantastic images from the construction of a huge building set that is just passing behind me. I couldn't resist to show those images. I'm Christian from Vision 6D, and construction is an amazing sector. Look at those images in which so many things are happening. There are so many changes in that area, which is so interesting for project management because so many things are happening. For example, they are using now BIM, the Building Information Model, to get all information from all the different suppliers, architects, engineers, civil engineers, and exchanging all that information. For me, it is a really interesting sector of activities. When you imagine, for example, that when you want to visualize the plan of a building, today you use 3D virtual reality and you model them into computer systems and you print in 3D the models of the future coming buildings. So all those things are making that in this area the technological change is really going fast, and companies in the construction industry have really to cope with those changes. For me, I'm simply fascinated by those views that are used with the drone that we get through the drone. You can just look at what is happening right now. And when you think that in that environment they can use drones, first of all to inspect sites, to see how a project is moving ahead, also have ideas about cities, where to build, how to build, and to see all what is happening in the construction sector. I'm really welcoming you to this session on which we will dig into planning. What does it mean really planning in the construction industry, and how do we do that with Microsoft Project? So I will share with you the experience I have, but of course this is a live session with the things that can happen during live sessions. But one thing that is important for you, it's that you can ask questions, you can say hi, and you can also, like that, have feedbacks on direct comments. I'm just back from a session today where I had a customer in the construction area that wanted from me some information about MS Project to help them doing their project with Microsoft Project. So this is something that I do. Of course, there are fees for this, but it's really a way when you do a session with me through which you learn the tool really fast, it's really efficient, and we go directly into your problem. So we have several customers coming from different parts of the world. We can do those sessions in French, in English, in German, in Spanish. That's it for the moment. So wherever you are welcome. We'll find a way to give you support. And once again, I'm Christian from Vision 6D. So, planning in this industry, and for this I need from time to time to go down to be able to switch the screens I have. So, planning into construction. Why the construction sector? First of all, because when we learn project management, when we learn Microsoft Project, a lot of the elements are quite abstract. With the construction industry, what is really interesting is that when you are talking about something like a building, everybody sees what is a building. When you are talking about different floors, everyone is aware and can understand this. So this is something that is really visual. Another thing that is interesting also in constructions are the costs. Costs in constructions are really high. They quickly go from several 100,000 to several million to maybe sometimes 100 millions and billions. So the cost part into a construction project is really important, which is maybe less the case when you do software development of a certain web page. So for this industry and those examples are really illustrative of what we can do with Microsoft Project, and also the questions and issues we have with project management. So I want to thank again those that participate, and do not hesitate to say hi. I'm always happy to know where you are from, and myself, I'm in Geneva and I'm doing that performance for you. So we know now that before that I switch, the planning. So I have had already a session which I presented the general aspects of construction, of project planning with Microsoft Project for the construction industry. Here I will dig into what is planning. We will in this session not plan a building site, but we are going first to look at what it means to do planning in a construction project. With Microsoft Project, there are a lot of tools that you can do, that you can use to do your planning. I've taken behind me two examples. The first one on the top is maybe less known than the Gantt chart that you see below, but is what we call a network diagram. So these are two typical drawings that will be used in the construction industry. At least the Gantt chart, everyone will more or less understand what it is and how to use it. A network diagram, it's maybe something that you see less often. I also want to add that those examples, they are really good for anybody, because if you are dealing with project management, what we are going to see today is really interesting for any one of you. So do not hesitate to ask questions and to make remarks, or as I said, simply say hi. So with those diagrams that I have here, in the previous session on construction, I described the major steps that we have to take when we do project management into a construction project. There are 3 points of views that were described and that are interesting. First of all, someone has an idea. For example, they want to build a small building. So this is the owner, the one that will finance the project, or at least will be the owner of the building. So this is the first point of view that you have into a project. The second point of view that is of real interest, it's that there will be an architect that will create and conceive that building. The architect might be from the owner company, it might be a third party that is hired by the owner. So in the case that I'm describing here, it is a third party that is hired. And plus, it is hired through a request for proposal process. That means that you are the owner, let's admit it, why not, why not? And you have an idea of a building, so you are proposing to several architects to compete and to make you propositions. So for this, you are doing what we say request for proposals. Once you've done that, you got the proposals, you choose and you decide with which architect you are going to work. So this was the second point of view. It's the one from the architect. So the architect, he has first to be aware that there is a request for proposal, decide to compete for that request for proposal, and once he competed, he has to get the answer, and in our case, that architect is lucky because he won the contract. So this was the second point of view. Now we have an owner, we have an architect, we need somebody to build. So for this, we will look for a general contractor. There are different ways to proceed. It might be that the owner is a company that has architect, they also have builders, and they are their own general contractors. In our case, we'll decide that the general contractor is, as the architect, a third party. How do we find the general contractor? We will go again through a request for proposal process. With that, the request for proposal might be done in several ways. It might be the owner or the people working for the owner that do the request for proposal, or it might be the architect and the engineering office. We'll admit in our case that there are those last ones, the architect and the engineering office, that prepare the request for proposal to find a general constructor. Then the general constructor, he will answer, make a proposition, and there will be several general contractors. So the owner plus the architect, they will decide which general contractor they take on board of the project. And once this is done, there will be contracts with the general contractor, and they will do the building, the construction of that building. So the third point of view that we have in that project is the one from the general contractor. A general contractor, he can either decide to have all the technologies and all the knowledges and all the possibilities and services necessary to build, or he can subcontract. In many cases, there are subcontractors. For example, in a building, you can have subcontractors for the windows, for the facade, for the steel, for preparing the concrete and all those parts. So these are different approaches in a project. So let's be aware and make it clear, there is no right way to do this, to do the planning, the preparation, and everything that is needed in the project and the management of the project. There are several ways to do it. It depends on the context. Those projects, they are complex. They involve a lot of people, a lot of different technologies, and a lot of money also. So there isn't just one way to do it. There are different ways to do it, and a lot of them are the right ones. The ones you need to choose is the one with which you are confident and you feel right. This is really the way I'm going, at least it's with the tools and methods I know. So with that, we've now described the overall aspects of what's happening into the project. This is really global. We are really at a high helicopter view. I agree. We won't enter into how to build that building, how to construct the building. If what you would like to see is a planning in which we say, okay, we prepare the basement and we will do this, this, this. Before that, we've done the foundation and we do this, this, this. It's not today, but it will come. Today, what we want is to understand what is the planning in such a project. What is it that I really need to plan into such a project to make sure that such a project is a success? So, with that, I have described you one way with the Gantt chart how to proceed with the project and the three different point of views. What I want now, it's just to show you the network diagram, the role of a network diagram. It will help you when you do the decomposition of the work. With the network diagram, we will concentrate on the different parts of the work, and we will establish relations between those different parts of the work. We don't need to know, although it will help, the durations of the work. All what we want to do is there a certain logic into this project? Where do I start? Are there things that I can do at the same times? Are there things that must wait, that some other parts are done? This is the role of the network diagram. I have an interesting video in which I show how I build or how I plan a project just from the network diagram. This video is really interesting because usually the way to plan is to start with activities, define duration, relations, link the things, the Gantt way. In that video I do it with the network diagram, just being concentrated on the logic of the project. What comes first, what follows, what has to wait, that other things are done. So I encourage you to go and watch that video. It's easy to find. It's network diagram, Vision 6D, MS Project, those keywords, and you'll get it. So with that said, this is the idea behind the network diagram. I won't extend more, but be aware that it is a tool that in the construction industry is a plus if you master it. An important tool to master with Microsoft Project, it's what we call the critical path. At one point, you'll have defined a lot of activities that need to be done into your project, and you will want to know what is the critical path. Or you will have people asking you in your project, what's the critical path? So you should better know that this tool exists in Microsoft Project and that it's a really useful view on your project. What does it mean? It means that the critical path is a succession of activities that are important to your project. Yes, because they are critical, they are important. Yeah, that's I could have guessed it. But what it really means is that if any task that belongs to that critical path is delayed by a few weeks, a month, then the complete project, the delivery date, when you will finish that building, will be delayed by that same amount. So it means, once again, if I say it, if you have one task that is on the critical path and that this task has 1 month's delay, then it means the complete project has 1 month's delay. To the contrary, to other tasks that are not on the critical path, those tasks they can have delays, and they won't influence the deadline of the project. Of course, if this depends on what we call margins. So, three notions we introduced right now: the critical path, critical activities, and margins. Okay? So all those elements, I have also videos already that you can already jump. You can go and look into what is the critical path. You can look and jump into margins. Why is this important? So normally a task that isn't on the critical path has a certain margin. So it can bear a certain delay before that the complete project is delayed. Of course, I hear some of you might be saying that, yes, but when our delay is bigger than the margin, then what happens? Then your task that wasn't on the critical path all of a sudden becomes a critical task. So this is it. So far, I think that it was just to give you some information, so you can imagine that in a construction project, if you should, I will to say it differently, you should better know which tasks are critical into your project. So this is about the critical path, which is also a tool that you find within MS Project. So let me just go one step back, because I was right. Okay, so this, what you see now, is the project as I had described it earlier. What we already did in a previous session, we were already defining different steps, and this you will see that if you are learning in project management, or you are preparing what we call a PMP, Project Management Professional Certification, what we describe right now is part of the knowledges you need to have to prepare such a certification. So what I teach includes elements that help you to prepare that certification. What I'm trying is to give you live examples and real examples that can be really useful for you to better see all those notions which are a bit abstract. So what you see is the general big steps that we have in a project. We have at the beginning of a project what is called an initiation. An initiation, it's the moment when you think about the project, what you want to have in it. You have a global view, a global idea of the budget. You have a global idea of what really will be done in it. In what I described previously, I haven't entered into planning, but be aware that into construction project, the planning is really something important due to the amounts of money involved, due to the quantity of resources, and also when you want to build the house, there is a lot of material that is involved. So planning, a well done planning part of a construction project can lead to a success, can lead to a successful business with good margins, or if you neglected some parts in this planning section, it could be rather the opposite, small margins when not worse. So planning is something important. Now to well understand what we include into the planning, we'll dig into this in a few moments. Planning, you have to understand that this will be done already a bit in the beginning of the project, then there will be more and much more, And through all the project, there will be planning also. You will have changes, you will have things that you maybe need to plan more in details as you are narrowing the construction start, or maybe you are already into the construction and there are things that need to be planned in more details. So planning is not one thing that you do in the life of a project once, and then you have nice Gantt charts, you have found the critical path, and you've used network diagrams, and you are really happy because you have diagrams to show in presentations. Planning is a constant effort through all the project. And there will be several teams involved into the planning. In certain simple project, then there is the project manager that does the planning. In more complex projects, you even have teams of planners who are working, for example, for the owner, or could be working for the architect, or could be working for the general contractor. So this is the context of planning into a project, and especially in those construction projects. With the planning, there is also a phase which is the conception. We've discussed it already a bit. It's from the moment that you've chosen the architect, then the architect has to do its work, or the architect office and engineering office, they have to do their work. It's the conception of the building that should lead to plans of all the aspects of the building. After the conception, once you've chosen the general contractor, there is a long work or long step, which is the procurement. You need to do procurement, and we will see that especially in the construction industry, there are, if you are working for governments, they can be city governments, they can be region governments, they can be country governments, you have to go through a certain number of legal steps in order to be able to do procurement. What do I mean by procurement? The first, no, not the first, but one example that we can take of procurement. Let's admit that we are in the situation where the architect has done its work, and now it's the time to choose a general contractor. Let's admit that our building that we are doing is a 3-floor building with basement, a lot of installations and systems inside. Let's admit the price 5 million euros to make something to make something simple, round, and simple to understand. So you know that you have more or less a budget of 5 million for that building. At the level of the European community, if you are doing this for a state organization, you have the obligation to go through a request for proposal. You cannot just meet some general contractor, agree with them for a price and hire them. These are measures that are anti-corruption, so you need to go with open and public request for proposal. So I will go back to this, but this is to make you understand that into the planning, for example, in that area, quite often you are confronted to public request for proposal. In the case of the European Union, I'm not 100% sure the value, but it's more or less from the moment you are at the level of 3.5 million, you have the obligation, and it's a legal obligation, once again, if you are a state, to put this on the European market and any company into the European market, and this is also for open competition, can compete to get that market. Those information, they are published on official websites. I'm sure that if you are in the construction sector, you were already confronted to request for proposals. If you are from other sectors, you might be a supplier that supplies to some projects in construction industry, and then you have the same obligations. So that said, we understand that procurement here, and this is the point, is also something that you need to plan into a construction project. So this is really an area where a lot of the notions that we have are used and are really useful, and you can really see and understand why do you have to understand as a project manager all those aspects. So this is why I've here shown that the procurement is also an important step. So we are now at a level where we have the concept, procurement has started, or we have what we need in order to be able to jump into the construction. And here we really have the construction work that needs to be planned. For this, as I said, you have a general contractor. The general contractor might have a lot of subcontractors, or he might be doing most of the work himself. This is how different project and organization can face complex projects. So I would like short break to thank you to participate, to follow. I'm enjoying doing those things and sharing my knowledges with you, and I'm also learning when I'm getting some feedbacks on all that. And I want to say that I give also direct sessions where you can, with me, those sessions, they are about 45 minutes, they can be several, and I have customers, people like you, who come and follow those sessions. The topics, they are general about project management, Kanban, they can be Agile methodologies. They are also, for example, about PMOs, a project management office. How do we do when we have a lot of projects going simultaneously? So I do those sessions, and also, of course, learning with MS projects. So all those sessions are really a way through which you can learn fast, because we understand what you need as additional knowledges, and I find really fast way, which are really efficient, to transmit you those knowledges and to help you improve, stand up into that project management matter and mastering MS project. So back to what we were doing. So we see that there is the construction. So of course we will need to plan the construction, and it's where a lot of coordination needs to be done. Once the building is done, there is what we call the post-construction phase. In the post-construction phase, you can have things like inspections. It's before that you can give over the building to the owner. Then, for example, some authorities need to come to validate, for example, the electricity, the security, as are some examples. So all this needs to be planned. Once this is done, then the owner can enter into the building, becomes at that moment really the owner of the building, The project, what is left is to close the contracts with all the parties and subcontractors, general contractor that were open. They will be closed. And of course, at that time, you will be able to think retrospectively on the project, what went well, what didn't go so well, and to summarize those informations in order to be prepared for the new projects that are going to happen after, to start with what you learned from this project. With that, we are at the point where we can say, here I can close my project. So all those steps, all what I described to you, is from the infancy, the idea or the innovation that is into a project, that are the start of a project, those big steps, till the moment you really close the project, you release all the partners, and you can move on onto another project. So these are the big steps that you need to consider into the planning of a construction project. You will understand that some of the planning steps are absolutely similar to other areas. For example, IT projects. You can also say that you have initiation, planning, conception and execution. You don't maybe call this construction. You might not have a post-construction, but you will have a closing. So those general steps for any kind of project, you will find them. What I haven't said is that the planning, you might know that there are different ways to plan. You've heard of agile ways. Maybe people are telling you to go agile, which is a good idea, but what is it exactly? And here what we follow is a method which is called predictive. It's that what we plan is what is going to happen. In the construction industry, it's what is really used. There are some places, there are some moments where you need the flexibility and agility, and this will be a topic that I will cover apart. But what I see, and I think this is interesting, it's that a lot of people currently are mixing the approaches. They are using predictive where it's required, and where they need a bit more agility, they are using those other methods. What it means is that we see an approach where every project, I would say, or a company is defining their own way to proceed and adjusting it over time. So as well into the planning, I can just recommend you to learn those different approaches and to think where you could improve something, for example, by using Kanban. Is this something that could be for us? Yes, I see, and I have customers which are in the construction sector or industries that use Kanban. For example, in the beginning, or architecture office, they use Kanban to prepare or plan part of their work. So those methods, they are available. You already can find some videos on my channel where you can get Kanban demos or Agile demos, and you can inspire and think where you could use them. So with this, what I want to say, it's planning is something quite wide, and I hope that through that example now, our discussion, it's something that became really understandable. So now I'm going to sit down just to relax a bit, but also to be able to show you some parts. So give me a few seconds to switch. So here I have behind me, I'm directly on the MS project, as you can see. So the extracts what I showed you, or where the backgrounds or illustrations of what I did right now, they are really things extracted from projects I have here. So here in Microsoft project, I'm often using the timeline because it's a convenient way, really synthetic, to present information. So on the timeline that you see here, you see again the initiation, the conception that is here. It is defined here inside. You see the procurement phase that is here, and here you see the construction, and with after here at the end the closing. So these are aspects that you see. You don't see the planning for the moment because I haven't brought the planning into the details or the view, but be aware it is here. So once again, those different aspects, they are what we call groups of processes. It means that as a project manager, there are a lot of activities that you must do in order to manage a project. Those activities are grouped into different processes, and those processes we see different group of processes. So there is a group that pertains to planning, and it's this that we are going now to look a bit closer. Before that, there is one last point that is here down on the last line, but that you also need to plan and to understand as a project manager. This is called control project management. It's in fact all the project management activities that you will have as a project manager into a project, into a construction project. But you will see that this is no different from what you will have in other kinds of projects. So my purpose today is not to enter into this, but my purpose is to show you that here I have a Gantt chart, and into the Gantt chart, into the planning of the project, we can add the activities that are for the project management and that are for the control. So project management, it's all what the project manager does during the project, and the control, it's from the moment that the project started. It's to make sure that we are into the budget, on time, and that the quality, what needs to be done into the project, is really done. So those three elements, they need to be checked. We need to make sure at regular times whether our project is on good track. Maybe we are faster than what we thought, or maybe we have some issues and we need to solve them. So the role of the project manager is to constantly control this. So for me, it's a good habit into the planning to add also those tasks of the project manager as being for control and project management. So for that, I'm now going to transition to something that is more about the planning. So what do we have into the planning? So you will see here that I've started a lot of activities. Those activities that you see here are, as they are defined for the project management professional preparation, it's part of what is called the body of knowledge for project management, and they are knowledge area. I've organized them in a certain way that it makes sense for us project manager. So we admit that we are now just into the planning. We might be in the beginning of the project. We know what we want more or less, but we start now by defining and determining what is really to be included into the building, how it will look like, what are the requirements from the owner of that building, for example. So this is what we call determine the scope. So I will emphasize on this once again. To determine what has to be done in a project is really, really important. That time spent on determining what has to be done, that is to say the scope, is of incredible value. It's the paramount. We even see where, for example, talking about agile methodologies, where they say, well, we don't need to define so much. We'll define the more and more that we move ahead. With experience on different projects, we see that one point that people want to improve, it's to determine better what has to be done into the project. What has to be done, it means also to define what doesn't have to be done in the project. For example, you are doing a building. Is the preparation of the roads leading to the building part of the project or not? This could be part, as it couldn't be part. If it's not part, then maybe it's good to say it, to write it somewhere that this is not part of this project. So once we have this, so we've determined, we did the part which is the scope. Work breakdown structure, the WBS, is something that is interesting. It's a way to decompose the project into what we have to do. So for that, just I will go back here to make sure that people know what I'm talking about. Yes, I'm taking here a renovation of a house. The renovation of a house, and to understand what is the work breakdown structure, you see that at the top there is the idea of the renovation. In that renovation of that house, it was a family house, we have to renovate the kitchen, bathroom, facade and the studio. So these are the four elements. Into those four elements, what do we have to do? Into the kitchen, if I take this as an example, you have to do the furniture, electrodomestic, the floor, walls and ceiling, meaning the dry walls. So this, you know, you have to do into the kitchen part. Now, if I expand the furniture part, what do I have to do? There is first a design that needs to be done of the furniture, some measurements to measure the space, and there is the installation. So if now, concerning the design, I go deeper, one level deeper, I can define wall 1, the wall 2, the wall 3, and for example, there will be a bar in that open kitchen. So you see that from the idea of renovation, we broke down to the level of the kitchen, then down to furniture, then down to what needs to be done as furniture, the design, measurements, installation, and what happens on each wall of that kitchen. So this is a way to do those decomposition, and this is part of defining the scope. And once you've defined at an adequate level that you think is fine enough, then you can also then admit that this is the level to which you want to work. I want to thank the people that participate. I've seen a remark about the sound. I'm trying to do my best. We are also remote. And I want to thank you, those who participate, because it's really a pleasure to see that people are following this. I'm trying here to bring some knowledges that you can get, you appreciate, so share those things with your friends. There will be several sessions, and talking about sessions, it's also possible to do direct sessions with me. Of course, this is not free, but direct sessions on project management, agile methods, software development methods, and of course Microsoft project and many other things. So just send me an email or a call and we'll set a session. So with that, I think that you see now WBS, first of all, what it is, and now imagine this for a complete building. So the decomposition is really something important, and you are the one defining at which level of detail you need to go. I will now switch back to Microsoft project. So you see that with all this, what I just described now, it's what you need to do in the planning part for the scope. After that, once you know what you want to do, you have to enter into what we call estimations. Estimation is something also that is really important for our building projects. Even if you had experience with some plumbers or painters coming and doing some work, what you want to know is how much it's going to cost. So you are going to ask them their estimations. You are going to ask them to make you an offer. So for them, they are into that estimation part. So now let's imagine that in your project you have many rooms to paint, many floors to tile. So all this will need estimations. In the construction industry, there are even software that will help you to do those estimations, and one excellent base is to refer to your historical information about previous project and previous estimations. What we do as estimates are material estimates. They are time estimates, of course. You will need first to estimate quantities. For example, we are planning the foundation of the building. We will need to estimate the quantity of concrete. We will need to estimate the quantity of steel. So maybe it's the general contractor, maybe it is the architect that does the estimates. We'll come back to this a bit later. But you will also need to estimate resources. By resources, I mean you will need people that will work on the building site. You will also need machines, systems, and all that. So all those are resources. There are maybe also resources of a different type. For example, you might need insurances for certain parts of your building place. So these are resources of type cost. So you will need to do the estimates of all those resources. After that, once you know the resources you need, once you know the duration and you know the material, you should be able to do cost estimations. So cost estimations is something that is really important into the construction industry, because quite often when you have proposals, one important factor, and really important factor, is the price. And this is a sector or an industry where it is really competitive. So companies, they have the greatest chance to win the contract when they can propose at the lowest price. So these are things, and this is why estimation of the costs is also important and really important. The other factor, I'm just repeating what I was saying in the beginning, it's that amounts involved into construction are quickly really high. So to master the estimation of the costs is also a key factor into a project. So what we have now discussed are estimations. Once you have the estimations, you can do the budget. And there might be several budgets, a budget that you have at the beginning and a budget that is maybe later on, that is the one that the owner will agree on. So about estimates, I would like to see if I can propose you here something. I want to show you an addition here. Yes, I want just to say a word about accuracy of estimates, and this is something I would have loved to hear in the beginning of my career. We said, for example, when you are at the initiation of a project, really at the beginning, you already want to have an idea. Then we admit that at the initial moments, that the variation on your estimation between what you think or what you estimate and the final result is evolving between minus 25%, so it could be 25% cheaper than what you had at the budget, up to 75% more than the planned budget at the initial stage of the project. So it means that you have a span of 100%, okay? So don't expect your estimations at the beginning of the project to be better than that. After, when you are into the planning, you did the work breakdown structure, for example, really detailed. We admit that that span has reduced to 35%. You are 35% unsure, and this goes from minus 10 to plus 25. Now, when you are even further at the definitive level of WBS, we admit that you have minus 5 to plus 10, which makes those 15% that we admit into projects. So we need to be aware that this is the situation when you do estimates in a project. So we were talking here about WBS. Here is a representation of WBS into MS project. What you see here is a column that is entitled WBS. It's simply a reference that we are sure that any activities into the project is well defined and is well referenced. And this is also something important on construction projects, that the project first of all has a unique reference, that you find the same reference in MS Project but also in other systems. For example, the CAD systems where they do the design of the building, that the references are absolutely the same. So with MS Project there is a way to do the work breakdown, structure, numbering, and you have also several ways where you can import it. So with that, I think that at that point now I've already discussed about the planning, the parts that are into this, and now I'm just going to come back to all those planning elements. We will continue on this. Here it's just to show you that what I'm showing you into an MS Project file, there is a dedicated file that has all the decomposition of those activities and processes that are important into a project, which are the activities of the project management function. And this is based on the PMBOK, which is the body of knowledge for project managers, and you find those different activities. So, cost management is an important part, so you will need to plan the cost management. And for this, I will now go back into the planning I had here. So, cost management starts once with the estimation, followed by you are able to do a budget. A budget is composed of two things: the estimates you did, the cost estimates, plus certain reserves. In construction project, it's important to prepare reserves because you never know what can happen, and in projects things are never really happening as we planned. So a budget, once again, it is composed of two things: the budget, costs, excuse me, plus reserves that you add into the project. Now what you will also need, it's once we are behind the budget, we've done the budget, what we will need is to plan the resources, really, at three levels: material resources, labor resources, and cost resources. Cost resources, remember, for example, the insurance. This is a cost resource. For example, another kind of cost resource, it's maybe you have an aluminium carpentry company that does all the window. So they propose you a certain cost, you agree on this. All what you are interested in is the cost. When they start and when do they finish, you are not going to plan their work. This is part of their own internal organization or own coordination. So this is part, and this is an example of a cost resource. So you will need to plan those resources. After that, you will need to do what we do, what we call the schedule. How do you plan the schedule? The schedule of the complete project, starting with the bidding or request for proposal for an architect. You will need to plan those things up to all the elements into the construction. Just one thing that comes back to my mind about the budget. The budget, there is the budget that is in mind of the owner, and then after, the architect with its estimation and the engineering part, they come with another budget. So they agree on this, they maybe reduce certain things, but they have a budget. And then you bid, or you got proposal from the general contractor, and the general contractor, he also will come with his own budget, meaning that he knows the price better sometimes than the architect and the engineering part. What will that part cost? Sometimes they match and it's perfect, sometimes there are differences, and then there needs to be negotiations between those two. So this is just something that when we talk about planning, to be aware about those situations. It's not because the architect and engineers, they have come with a one budget, that it will really be the budget that you get in the end. So this said, one thing that I think that is important also, it's never do the planning all alone. This is not something that has to be done all alone by the project manager. It has to be done in teams. It has to be done in teams, for example, with the owner in the beginning, then the architect and the engineers, they are doing the planning, and then with the general contractor, and the general contractor with subcontractors. All those combinations, everybody has input to give you. Certain things can follow certain logic, but you have suppliers that will have better idea or do it in a different way, or in a shorter way or longer way to do it better. So have all those people into what we call planning meetings to be able to get the best out of that collective intelligence, and to have really a planning on which every partner in the project will agree. So this is the important part on planning a project. So we will see that we've arrived to the schedule, the cost management. Into the planning, you will need also to plan the cost management. That is to say, how are you going to manage the cost? How often do you want information to come back? How often do you want to compare the actual cost to the planned costs? So those things are part of planning for the costs. So I don't want to enter more into this, but there is one point that I like to have. It's about planning risks management. Risk is something that all projects have, but sometimes people look at me a bit strangely and they say, but what do you mean by risks, and more by planning the risks? So I give you an idea here, construction. There are many insecurity, it's unsafe place. We try to make them as safe as we can, but you hear everywhere there are accidents. So there are risks associated to this, so you need to analyze constantly those risks. And the risk analysis is something that as soon as you start the project, even at the idea of the project, ask yourself, what are the risks? For the owner, of course, there are some financial risks, but there are many other risks. An example during the construction, it's the weather. Simply because you can have bad weather, you can have even storms or rain. So imagine flooding of certain part of the building site. All these are risks that you must consider, and risk management and planning for risk management, it means to know that at regular intervals you will give an eye to the risks. You will, for example, say that you do regular risk meetings, risk analysis meeting, just to see if from the different teams you have some feedback that comes to tell you, oh, we spotted this, or you should pay more attention to this. So risk and planning risk management into a project is something that has to be done. So here I had a few examples, and of course the activity 29, and with this I also want to say that this list is absolutely not exhaustive. It's just a few among a lot. So the 29, the activity 29 is important because it's corruption risk, and it's why for certain state government projects you have to go through public requests for proposals. So this is also a risk that you need to constantly analyze, and once you analyze a risk, there are measures, there is impact, and you will need to proceed in order to control the risk. Risk is also a subject that we are going in the future to increase, and that we are going to give you information and also knowledge about this. So far with risk part, and now one point that is key in project management, it's the communication part, especially when you have a lot of stakeholders, people involved, people interested by your projects. When you are into construction project, you build even a house, you need to have permissions from the local authorities. You will have neighbors that can give input into what they think of the project. So how do you plan your communication about that project? So it's this, that into the planning you need to define how are we going to do that as the project management team. How are we going to communicate with the authorities? How are we going to communicate with our contractors? What kind of feedback do we want by the contractors from the building place? Do we want real-time information coming back to our systems? Are we able to do that? Am I just dreaming as a project manager? How do I want my communication into the project? How often do I have to report on the advancement of the project? How do I report to the owner? Is it in the written form? Is it simply formal and once a month maybe a report in written form? Or is it every day because the project is complex and they constantly want to know money-wise where they are and want that information? So all this is part of what we call planning the communication part into the project. Planning, you will also need now, if I move one step further, you will need to plan the quality. How are you going to go about the quality? How are you going to check that what is done is really done? So how are you going to do those controls? So this is part of planning the quality management. In the plan, do you have certain standards? Of course you have standards which you expect to be respected, so you need to formalize this somewhere. So this is all what I want to say about quality management, but you understand, and I'm sure that you really know that it is an important topic. Procurement management. How are you going to do the procurement process? When? How does it happen? What are the delays? What are the deadlines and all that? I'll quickly show later on a graph on that. So with that, I want now to move to another point, which is specific to the construction area. This is a knowledge domain, which is health and security, which is really important. We shortly said about this. building places are dangerous places to work, so there are a lot of security and health measures that must be taken. So how do you plan them? How do you manage them? This is what we need to do into the planning part of the project for health and security management. So this, I think, for everyone, it's really visual. Those that are preparing PMP exams, these are topics that are not part of the PMP exams, but they are part of the extension which is there for the construction sector. Another part that you see, that is the part 38, which is the financial management. At this level, it's how do I plan my financial management. Any construction project is an investment, so you must think like an investor. There is a lot of money involved. When is it that I need my liquidities, the cash flow, at which moment do I need my cash flow and which amount? So planning the financial management goes about this. It goes also into how do I finance the project. So these are important parts that need to be done, need to be planned in any construction project. So imagine the images we had in the beginning, just giving you some idea. In such a project, what is the financial management part of such a project? It's surely not something that you can just do somewhere on the sheet somewhere. You need to constantly be aware about this. You constantly need to be aware what is the cash flow I need next month, and in 2 months, maybe in 3 months. Did my investor really do the money transfer we are expecting to have by the end of November? Is this really as they understand it? So all this is planning the financial part, planning the management of the financial part. So with that, I've described all what is included into planning a construction project. And of course, what I've just told you is what is really at a high level into a project you need now to enter into the details of all those aspects. But at least now you have a canvas that you know that even if you are building a house for yourself, your house, all those aspects, you must take them into consideration, and you must understand what you are going to do and plan what you are going to do at the level of your project. So this is the part that is here, that is about the planning into this project. And you see here down into Microsoft Project, there is a function which is bidding RFP. It's the request for proposal process, and I've removed it. So maybe this is something that you don't often use into MS Project, but I did deactivate a task. So you see here, I can come and activate the task, and this will give us the opportunity to look into this task. And I will open it here, and I will just show you, and you see also something that it appeared here up into the timeline, and I just want to have you aware what it means globally planning for a request for proposal. So for that, I'm showing you that here there is the launch of the request for proposal. And I'm showing you this because these are things that I also do for some organizations, because in the project management team they might not have people, first of all, who know really well how those processes are ongoing, and there is a lot of documentation and deadlines that you need to follow. So these are things that I've done for some companies. They subcontracted me the part of following their request for proposal, and first of all to prepare the request for proposal. So once you've done the preparation of the request for proposal, there is an interval which is open for questions. All the potential suppliers, they can ask questions. And once you have the answer to those questions, you will send them to all those that said that they are interested by making a proposition for your project. So after that, you have here in red down a deadline for your proposals to come in. So you have clearly to define when is the Sorry, we have had a short interruption, so I'm back. Fixing the camera that you can see me. I will remove that at the addition of all this. But I was saying, so we were into the bidding, the proposal process. So you must, when you do a request for proposal, you must give a certain time to the suppliers to make their proposition, and you define a deadline for those propositions. Once the deadline is there, any offer arriving or proposition arriving after the deadline, you will need to reject them. So this is how it happens, and after that you do an analysis of the proposition or an evaluation of the proposition. You might find and decide who you are going for, or you might be in a situation where you say, we are doing here a short list. That is to say, you maybe received 15, 20 propositions, and you say, no, we cannot decide. We'll take 3 or maybe 5 of them, but 3 is a good number, and we will go with them through additional evaluations. So at that point you communicate to everyone that answered that the short list contains company A, B and C, and you thank all that participated, but this is how you do it. And then you go again through an evaluation process with the 3 last ones, which are into the short list. And for that, once you've done that evaluation, you are then at a point where you are able to say, okay, for example, the carpentry in that building will be attributed to company A, for example, subcontractor A. So this is what you are able to do. So these are things, and especially into the construction industry, that you must understand really well, because it can delay your project. Now, one thing that is also important at this point to understand, that the decision governments and organizations are making might be contested, and this might bring delay into the project. So this can happen, and these are risks that you must factor into a project. So if you are on the side of the owner, the architect, you must factor this. But if you are a general contractor, you also don't know exactly when the project will start. Maybe you could start in summer, but one other contractor that proposed something is in disagreement with the decision and goes through a legal proceeding to oppose to that decision, and all this delays the project. And this means that you expected as a general contractor to start on your project, to have money coming in, and it won't be the case because all the project is delayed. And those legal delay, they might be sometimes really long, going sometimes to months, to years, and even several years. So these are things that you must really factor, plan them well, and it's why also I'm extending on this, because these are situations that I live as such, that you really have into projects. Especially, for example, let's admit your building is a school, so you are absolutely in that context of doing something for government, and there are great chances that you will need to enter into something which is a request for proposal. So if you haven't been confronted to this, be aware that those knowledges are really valuable, because soon or later in that industry you will meet those processes as a supplier, as an owner, as a city, town government, or regional government, or federal national government. So with that, it was just to show you that aspect which you really have to take into consideration when you plan a project into the construction industry. Of course, that in the coming videos we will detail those parts really more, till you will get really examples. So it's really good thing to be able to follow, and there will be additional sessions. So I want to thank all of you who participated. For me, it's a pleasure to see that people participated, and once again there will be more of those sessions. So I'm really open to comments and to have feedbacks on this. And this is the base of a material that I hope to make growing, and that I will grow, to which you will be able to dig into, and to try to share with you not only the knowledge of what is project management or how to use MS Project, but really the experience. How was it useful? Where did it really help me? What did I have to pay attention? For example, the request for proposal steps, I didn't have anybody that could explain me this so clearly and so shortly as I could do it for you right now. So once again, if you are interested, you can have direct sessions with me. Those sessions, they can be on any topic about project management. They can be on Microsoft project. They can be on agile methodologies. Should I insert in my company and start to use Kanban boards and things like that? The answer of course is yes, but how to do it, how to introduce them, these are things and subjects we can discuss together. And also, you are working on special projects, you have some issues, maybe some conflicts or things or uncertainties, and you would like to discuss them with me, do it. I have customer calling me, we spend certain sessions together, and it's really helpful, really efficient. So what is left to me is to wish you a great day, and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.